We've all heard those unsettling stories about someone losing their property because of something called squatters' rights. And what they're probably referring to as squatters' rights is someone acquiring property through the means of adverse possession. I'm Tiffany Weber, a North Carolina real estate attorney, and while adverse possession is rare, I have seen it and I've had court cases on it. So I'm going to talk you through what adverse possession means and how you may be able to protect yourself against it. First, you need to understand what is adverse possession. And this is property that you didn't own to start with. So this would mean, somebody else's property, you never paid for it, you didn't buy it, but you have occupied it in a certain way for a certain amount of time that you may end up with rights to it. A lot of times this happens with farmland because the boundaries of their property meandered and they didn't have it constantly being surveyed. It's expansive land, so they're not monitoring the boundaries of their property to make sure nobody is sliding over in it. So that's kind of how this happened. Now, it's important to know that adverse possession doesn't just automatically happen once you reach a certain milestone. This is something that has to be litigated in court to establish. At least in North Carolina, you'd have to do some sort of quiet title action or a declaratory judgment in which a judge would say, yep, you've met all these elements, this property is yours now. So since I'm going on and on about the elements, what are they? The acronym that we used in law school to remember these elements is so silly, but it's a horse on every corner. So A stands for adverse, obviously, because it's adverse possession. But that means contrary to the true owner's possession. So adverse and hostile are really similar. Hostile doesn't mean, that would be the second one, so the H, the horse. Hostility doesn't mean arguing. It doesn't mean fighting. It just means contrary. So I own property. You start to, encroach on my property and use it as your own. Well, that's hostile to my ownership. And it also has to be without permission. So I don't want you there, but you're doing it anyway. The next thing, a horse on, the on actually is O and N. So we kind of combine those, open and notorious. So meaning you can't be secretly using the property. It's not like you go out there and you hide what you're doing and the owner can't know about it. Notorious meaning that really anybody could see you're doing it. There's nothing quiet about it. You're just out there using the property as if it's your own. All it would take is somebody paying attention, halfway paying attention to see that you're using the property as your own. So again, you're not going to get adverse possession by sneaking around and secretly using the property in a way that wouldn't put the owner on notice. Next thing, a horse on every corner. So the E is exclusive, meaning nobody else is using it with you. You're using it for yourself. The owner's, actually not using the property with you. It's not like a whole bunch of people are doing the same thing. If you've got 100 people that are using a roadway on a property, but then you try to claim adverse possession and you're just one of 100 people doing that, that's not exclusivity. And then finally, the corner part of a horse on every corner is continuous. So continuous and uninterrupted. Now this one can be kind of confusing if you read the case law, because continuous and uninterrupted doesn't necessarily mean that you are using the property 24/7, 365. It's not like you just have to be parked out on the property, never leaving, etc. This is a pattern of use that it's not like, you go out there for 1 week a year and then you don't come back for 3 years and then you're there for 2 weeks. It means predictability. It means that there is some routine to how you're using this property. And the other thing about this adverse possession claim is that your intent has to be that you're trying to own the property. You're claiming it as yours, even though it's not. So that's kind of the adverse and hostility thing, is you're saying, no, this is my property. And you don't have permission, you're doing so without permission of the true owner. And you're basically treating it as if it's your own, and you're doing so for that limited time. So if you don't ever have the intention to claim the property as your own, and you've got the permission to do it, you're not actually doing it contrary to the true owner's interest, then you're not going to be able to meet those elements. So intent is a really big part of proving adverse possession. So if you're a property owner hearing this, like, how do I keep myself from, having somebody take over my property because they've been using it? Well, one is pay attention to who's using your property. If you are, if you're someone that owns a big tract of land, then, 20 years is a long time for the most common type of adverse possession, though it's not that common. So that's a lot of time for you to go out there and check your property out to make sure that people are not using it contrary to your interest. So that would be number one, is paying attention to the property and who's using it. Another thing is you have to be very careful about saying you don't have permission to do this, because once you say no permission allowed, then that time could start ticking. So if you have someone using your property and you told them they can't do it, before you make any sort of communication to that other party, consult with a real estate litigation attorney first. Not me, I don't do litigation, but there are plenty of really good ones in your area. Consult with them first before you make communications, because you may be inadvertently triggering one of the elements of adverse possession that wouldn't have otherwise been met. But it means you do have to actually be paying attention to your property, who's using it, and making sure that nobody's using your property without your permission. So lots of stuff to go into on adverse possession. Hopefully you learned something about adverse possession and what it actually takes to have someone take over your property without your permission.